Hello. So let's get the party started, as Dee always likes me to say. Hello, planet Earth. Welcome. I'm Lilia, and my pronouns are she and hers. And thank you for joining us for today's 8th episode of the Maynard's interview series for parents, partners, and educators, which is called Reflective Conversations on Gender Transition. These live streams are a way that we've been highlighting some amazing people in the world who have trans identities, or people who are the trans community's allies, providing inspiration for you, our viewers. So today's edition is especially for parents and families who are in the process of transitioning with children. So I'm very honored to have, as usual, the Maynard here from North America. And also Janna Barkin. Thank you so much for coming.
Hi, so glad to be here. Thank you.
And Janna, I'd just like to say, is an educator and author of Dee is an educator and author of a 3-part workbook series on navigating transition. And Janna here is the author of He's Always Been My Son. And there's a subtitle there to the book as well. What is that subtitle?
A mother's story about raising her transgender son.
Exactly. So those who are listening now, please let us know if you have any questions pertinent to parenting a trans child, and we'll try to incorporate them into our conversation today. I'll be watching out for your comments and questions. So Dee, before I hand over the interview to you, can you just tell us how are things going with your partner conference in December?
Oh, thanks. It's going very well. We have an early registration on now, so that ends at midnight of November 5th, and then it's the regular registration price. But so it's going really well. I had my meeting with my team on Monday, and we're all excited and creating the event. So thanks, Lil, for letting us last month, talk with some of the presenters. It was very nice of you. Thanks a lot.
No problem. And the links are in the description of this video. If anybody wants to find out more, they can just write to us, and I'll put you in contact with the people who are organizing the conference.
Great. The people could email us at thepartnerconference@gmail.com. thepartnerconference@gmail.com. It's really simple. I think we said .com last time, but it's at gmail.com. So just so we have that straight. And so can I talk about Janna?
Of course.
Okay.
Please.
So I was hearing about Janna's book after my books came out. I thought I really wanted to get a copy of it. And when I was doing my research about it, and before I even got it, I realized that we had the same publisher. I couldn't believe it. So I love our publishers, Jessica and C Publishers, and they their motto is books that make a difference, and I hope that mine do, and I know yours is. And so I read it and I loved it, and I went through it. And when we did our prep, Janna commented, sometimes people don't have a chance to read the book, but they come in and talk with her, and I'm thinking, I would always read a person's book, and it was such a joy to read her book. One of the things, I have it right here, in fact. One of the things that struck me while I was reading it is what a perfect companion book it is for my book, the reflective workbook for the parents and families. That I feel as, I know this didn't happen because yours came out first and mine came out second, but it feels as if you read my book, was answering the questions, and then took those pieces and put your book together. Because we talk about, the coming out, we talk about the questions parents might have and the unknowns, and you answer those and how your journey was. Talk about some parts of grief we'll get into, loss, depending on how you word that, the pronouns, of course, and names, and talk about friends and family. We talk about education. We're both educators, which, is clear. And what I love about the book too is that we're similar in our style of writing, in that it's very conversational, but it's also small pieces, small chunks at a time. And we let each piece or part talk for itself, so that you can pick up both of our books and then put it down, and you don't have to remember what you just read, because the next part is something that just continues, and you could remember the connection easily, but it can stand on its own. You can go to any part of my book and any part of your book and just do it independently, just read it. And I think that that's what's really beautiful. There are times that people even refer to something again and like refresh your memory. And I also noticed that when I was reading it, I couldn't help but think how we both are very aware of our audience. And another thing about you, which is aligned, is you're very reflective, as is everyone in that. We both have snippets of like different people telling stories. And so I just love your book. So can I get started and ask you some questions?
Of course, it's great to be here with you, and really appreciate, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying already. So I'm excited to get into it.
Okay, so what led you to write the book? Let's start there.
That's a great open question. So it's a long story to get to the book, but what happened was, after my son and our family experienced what we did, which was helping our son become himself, which of course we'll parse out as we go along. But I found myself wanting to somehow support trans youth. I got a very clear message when I was on a yoga retreat about just that was my next iteration of self, was somehow helping trans youth. And being a teacher all my career, preschool teacher, childbirth educator, yoga teacher, felt like I was changing careers a lot. Now I'm going to be writing. I wasn't writing as a career. I was blogging. I got inspired by a friend who I met at Gender Spectrum conferencing. Actually, I met her on Facebook, but we came together at Gender Spectrum conference. She was doing a writing workshop, how to blog for advocacy. Her name's Roz Keith, and she founded Stand with Trans. Just want to mention her. She's one of my collaborators in life. Yeah. And she was just teaching us about, writing can be so cathartic and also useful for others. And knowing that I'm a teacher, I teach what I'm learning about and passionate about. And so I started blogging, and people were interested. And so it got shared, and someone said to me, oh, you should write to Arianna Huffington and ask her for some room on Huffington Post. And I said, what are you talking about? How do I get to? She handed me her email. And so I wrote to her directly, and she immediately connected me with Noah, who was the gay writers desk at the time. And they said, yep, you're on. So I started blogging there. This was slightly different than their platform now. And I just started to get a little traction, and our beautiful publishers, Jessica Kingsley. The next year I was on a yoga retreat, same place, Esalen. If anyone knows, it's a very strong place to do deep work. Yeah. And so there I was writing, and I got an email inviting me to submit a big book proposal, because they had just started on their building of their gender identity books, as you say. What was their tagline? Can you remind me?
Books that make a difference.
Books that make a difference. And so they were looking for books that make a difference, and they were specifically looking for parents or others who have had experience and were writing, and they found me through my blog, and they basically invited me to write the book. And I was flabbergasted, because I honestly did not think myself as a writer. I'm a teacher. But I said, I have to say yes, because how do you say no when someone invites you in to do something so impactful? So they also wanted us to write a positive story, or they were looking for positive stories also. And while of course ours had its challenges, yes, overall is a positive story of love and support and getting the resources we need.
Can I just want to just interject about something? I think that something that you brought up is that it is very cathartic for people to write and journal through all of this, and that it's clear when I read your book that it probably was that process for you, because I can feel your emotion and everything that you were going through, as well as others that you tap into to tell their stories. And I feel that was one of the goals that I had when I had written my book, was that I wanted people to be able to answer the questions and almost learn to write their own story. And it's not because parents are often asked to answer questions that they might not know the answers to. And by journaling and writing your own story, if you don't end up becoming an author, I mean, we've both been so blessed, I don't know what other words to say, is that that at least when you're writing it, you're able to then process it in a way that, I mean, it definitely, that was one of my goals when I did it, so that they can end up telling their story to others, because people do ask, and sometimes you need to be prepared what you're going to say. And so when you were writing your book, there are certain terms that you use. So I just want to talk about them a little. Is that all right with you?
I think
you talk about before, early, tween, and the transition years. And you broke it up into certain sections like that. So explain why that and how that part came about.
Okay, I started my adult careers as an early childhood educator and a developmentalist. And so I thought it came to me that often when a person is going through something such as a gender affirmation process, sometimes we call this transition, sometimes we call this finding congruence. And of course, we could say all of us could be on this developmental journey in our life. We go from the early years. So for me, I thought to relate the chronological experience of being a mother of a trans person, a child, and looking back and grouping into these, what I saw developmental stages, not just age-wise, but in the becoming of my child, and also my own understanding, I would say that probably goes along with. And that I also say in the book that these stages aren't necessarily for an age. So there could be people who transition late in life, and yet they perhaps have these developmental transitions where there's the before time, the unknowing, or the just not tuned into. And then there's the early, I have an inkling, I'm just starting to understand. And then we go on the tween. We can imagine that's like an awkward time where things are happening, but we don't really know, and we don't have the wherewithal. And then the teen years, when you're really going through it. My son went through 2 puberties. Okay, I don't know if a lot of people in life can say they lived with a child through 2 puberties, right? So that is kind of where I'm getting to with these developmental stages.
Okay, and I very well put that it, regardless of the age that you transition, there can be these different milestones or stages. It's not a guarantee or anything, but I've seen it, as an early childhood person, I see it with young children, and I can say that it's pretty obvious when it's happening. And yes, puberty twice, and the tween years was something else. So you also talk about the terms, your views of what complete, now and complete now is, just so that our listeners understand what those terms meant for you when you were writing that.
Absolutely. So my son was interviewed one time. He agreed to a one-time interview. Amaya is my son's name. He gives me full permission. He's 23 now, so I think it's so important to make sure we all know that he has given me full permission to share his information. And so he was being interviewed when he was 17 by the BBC. We were part of a documentary, and he was featured as a person who was able to have gender affirming surgery under 18. And he was asked by the interviewer, Louis Theroux, do you have any feeling that you might want to have more medical interventions, or Amaya said, or do you feel complete? And Amaya said, yeah, I feel complete. And a reflective moment went by and he said, for now. So I use those terms exactly how I felt he meant them, which is, yes, he felt complete. He feels whole in what he needed in this moment to resolve his gender dysphoria and to live as himself, to live as his authentic self. And the for now is, who knows where we are going to be in the future? Who knows how any of us feel? I feel this is not just about being trans, but being a human being. We are always, well, I would say some people don't, but many of us are in this process of becoming. And so the for now is all we can really know.
Right. And, I'm grateful that you brought up that he's 23, because Lil and I, talk about this a lot, is I never reveal, I ask parents not to reveal a child's name, and, just to keep them safe and protected. And we talked, you and I, Janna, talked about this before, and I know that hopefully we'll get lucky enough for you to read Amaya wrote Amaya's Blessing, that section, we'll get you to read something from the book. And so that's important, and that each family's decision or conclusion with their child included is up to them. You mentioned you had medical interventions. Some families don't. Some people wait, and that we're not advocating one thing or not. We're not putting anything down, but we're not forcing any. We're just here to tell a person's story and explain how your journey worked. And so there, in your book, I had mentioned there were different points of views through the lens of your son's, people who were in your son's life. It could be family members, friends, people that are called aunts, but maybe not blood relatives, but your chosen family, or additional chosen family, because you seem to have an amazing family. Your neighbors, community members. So, who did you decide to tell? How did you come to the conclusion who you're going to ask, even in the book, and also in life, to tell? And how did that impact your life with their reactions?
A couple of different questions in there. So the piece of our family and family involvement in general, reflecting that we were one of those families who thankfully had very positive responses from people. Our story is that my child, assigned female at birth, is very gender expansive in that he consistently, and I always use he pronouns, even though when assigned female, we use she. So we use she pronouns all the way till he was 14.
In fact, in the book, there are specific times when people refer to him and you clarify, because this is what this email said at the time, or this is what, to be honorable to understand that the pronoun that he uses is he, him, his pronouns. But yet, because it was a document, you weren't going to change it to keep its authenticity.
Thank you. Yeah. So our family, everyone has their own journeys. So of course we could detail it out. They range from my daughter, who is 5 years elder, to Amaya. Emily describes in the book of just never feeling like she had a sister. She saw other families and how sisters were, and that was not their relationship. And as soon as she started using brother that fit. So she immediately, it was the right. She also knew something in her heart of hearts, but we don't have these words, when.
Well, isn't there a thing about, I mean, I don't want to give everything away, but there's something about before Amaya was born.
Oh yeah, that's
I know
that's a little gem.
This book.
That's a gem, but we will talk about it, it was Emily was 5 at the birth, and it was Emily's job to tell us as we said at the time, sex of the baby. I didn't do gender. I didn't look at I didn't look at the internal. I didn't do sonograms, things like that. That's separate from this conversation. But yes, Emily was there at the birth, and it was her job to let us know. And we all looked when the baby was born. But Emily said, I think it's a boy. And I said, well, this baby has a vagina. This baby is a girl. And so we all went on our way. But Emily, the book is the little name of the chapter is called She Had One Job. Right. And she did it right. Right. So that's just one gem. Yeah. And that does come up again in one of our chapters, which I don't know if this is a good time or not, but I love reading the chapter Grandpa. I wish I was.
We get to that, but I wanted to let you finish the other thing. So Emily was one person, because I do jump, but I think that people would want to understand your story in that, and then we get to
bringing it back.
Yes, bringing it back. Yes.
So Emily is one direction, and then I would say another friend of mine. She loves my child. She's one of the aunties. She absolutely supported and loved my child for who he was always, but again, with not a lot of understanding about what it meant to be trans or to be a trans child. She just kept asking me, well, why can't Amaya just be a butch lesbian? And I thought, well, that's just not Amaya. But she continually asked these questions, and I don't want to throw her under the bus because she eventually got it. But it was a different journey toward understanding. And so not everyone gets it right away. People might ask inappropriate questions, and it is up to each family. We chose to be really out and open with our story. It's purposeful. We wanted to, and Amaya was old enough when I wrote the book to agree to that. He was 17, and that's a very different thing than when having a young child or an adult child who wants to be private.
Right, and then Amaya has another sibling, right?
Yes, he has an older brother, and he's my stepson. And he said, I don't understand. I will never understand. And I love my brother. So we hold these things. And I think that's so evident in your book and in mine, that we can hold more than one thing and more than one feeling at once, and that there can be support and also not understanding. There can be love, and I don't know what this is. I've never heard of this. And we all have each our own experience. As far as writing the book, we put out a pretty large call. I put out to people who I thought might be interested in writing, and also would be responsible, and also were witness to Amaya's life, and his as witness, as observers. And we put out a pretty wide net, and I was really pleased with how many people were willing to offer their reflections, their insights, and themselves, because some of the folks really wrote some personal stories.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, people were really bluntly honest. And I mean, going back to, I know when you talk about the grandparents, that was like actually my next question that I had in mind is like, what role, you've explained like the role that your children played, Emily's, starting from Emily's one job, but your husband, the grandparents, let's bring the conversation in about them, because, friends and family could play a big role in this. So you want to expand on what you want to say about the grandfather and your husband?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, my husband is my main editor, and he wrote quite a few chapters in the book, and he is truly my number one fan and supporter. And so I do believe I could not have done this without him. And of course, that's true because, as Amaya says, Mom, I don't know where I'd be without you. Obviously, I gave birth to him. Same with my husband. Couldn't be here without him because that's anyway, that's our little joke. But truly, I feel so grateful that my partner and I met very evenly on this. And that can be a challenge too for spouses, and why I think your book would be so great, because it helps everyone go through their own experience. Ours is reflective of our own experience. And he and I were step by step together. And when one would be a little confused, the other would help the other. And my mom, she wrote a part of the book, and my son is.
I love your mom. I just got to say, I love your mom. I wish I could meet your mom. She's like next on the list. Okay, go ahead.
I think we might have to meet when I visit the New York area.
I can't wait.
And I know she might even be listening in right now.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't even know. I just think I love what you, okay, we'll keep going. I want everybody to read her part. Go ahead.
Yes, we won't give it all away, right?
Oh, no.
And yes, but she, we all had to learn, but she's really into Facebook, and she is a super ally on Facebook. She's always posting really positive, visible things and supporting people, and calling out people when they're saying not such great things. So I just love that about her. And she really has been right there with us, even having her own questioning about Amaya, from the way he was holding his posture or behaving. She's an early childhood educator as well. She's in elementary school, but mainly kindergarten. And so I think she also looked at this child and said, very interesting, but we could not know. And then my mother-in-law also wrote very long, and her reflections are incredible. She's a scholar. She's a UCLA professor emeritus, and her reflections were so powerful in kind of chronology of what she witnessed almost as a person in the music world. And she's very interested in politics. And so what she witnessed over her own evolution of understanding. And she also, in the beginning, which surprised me a little bit, was questioning even, well, should you get the kids' hormones checked? Maybe there's, something wrong. And as we know, transness isn't really dependent on your hormone levels. It's much bigger than that. It's more expansive than just one piece of a person's makeup. And so, but she was really interested in the medical piece, and we should study this. And we had to learn and grow together. But again, I just hearken to, they've always been, all the family, my late father-in-law, he passed in December, and I found an email from him that I actually regretted not putting in the book, because I invited him to write, and he said he'd leave it to others, but he did write a snippet. And someday I'll put that out in a blog. Sometimes you find things later and you have to write more. That might be for my next book.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I talked to you about stuff, so I don't want to say anything.
Right.
So,
we won't.
Well, we won't unveil right now. So more to come, lips, an ellipsis, right? So the thing is that, yes, I like that you have your mother-in-law, because hers is much more scientific, very academic analysis, the politics, a lot of stuff. And I thought she was fabulous also, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think that I love the word smorgasbord. And I think that both of thanks for saying nice things about my book, that's the idea, is like have a smorgasbord, like a little sample of everything, and you take what you want, and we always saying leave the rest behind in certain forms, we say that. And so I think that let's talk a little bit about the part, because I think it connects to your father, if I'm right, about Amaya's name, and that how Amaya did not change their name, his name. Sorry, I
Yes.
say they now, but I know it's.
I know it comes through sometimes.
Because sometimes that is just a pronoun. It didn't change his name. Because I know that was like something people continuously it seems often people are asking that, correct? And Amaya is very clear, and you're very clear in your answer, when people ask you. So it's yours.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most sensitive parts when a person finding gender congruence perhaps changes their name in that process. Most parents choose their children's name very carefully, often in memoriam or dedicated in honor of someone very important and special in their lives. So there's so much emotion around that. And parents often spend a lot of time and energy looking for that name, that right feeling. Our child is named for my father, who died when I was pregnant with Amaya. And we had several names picked out. And I didn't really want to use my father's name because of my own grief in the moment. But I knew also that I would use my father's name if my child was born male, or should we say assigned male at birth. And I honestly, asked Spirit for a girl to make it easier. So that's one of our little inside jokes in our family, like, be careful what you ask for. Oh my goodness, because of course I did have to make some important decisions later on that I never expected anyway. So back to it. So Amaya, for whatever reason, chose not to change his name. He also didn't really have to change the way he dressed.
I mean, I have a question, so then you did name your child Amaya. Even
I named my.
Said you would only, if I'm incorrect, tell me, because you said if your child was assigned female at birth, you were not going to use the name Amaya.
No. My father's name is not Amaya.
Amaya, right.
My father's name is Aaron.
Aaron, I just wanted, right, because we talked about.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we chose not the male name. We chose a different name, which
is Amaya, which back. I got it. Yes. I mean, yeah. I did get it, but I wanted to make sure because we talked about using the name. Okay.
Right. And Amaya was a female name we chose with an A. In our family tradition, you don't necessarily use the exact same name. Use a letter in our family tradition. So we chose Amaya. And of course, looking back, Aaron could certainly be any gender. And also Amaya chose not to change his name and did change pronouns and said, thank you, Mom, for giving me a gender neutral name. And I thought to myself, well, I'm glad you feel that way. I personally didn't think of it that way, but I also think, that it's great that you feel that way. And I do understand that it can be really hard when a person changes their name. And some parents find creative ways to resolve that. They might see if the person is agreeing to be creative together, or some kids do actually choose the other gender name that the parents had, and some absolutely want no input from the parent. And it seems like a very important thing when a person transitions for many people to choose this name that describes themselves in their authentic self. For Amaya, he even did say, I don't feel like I want to change it. It describes me, who I am. I'm not changing who I am. That was important to Amaya. Amaya's transition wasn't really about changing who he was. It was affirming. People often saw him as a boy way before his transition. So his story is slightly unique in that way, right? So perhaps reflecting might have been why he didn't have as much dissonance with the name. I'm not sure, but it's one of my thoughts.
Okay. So I know you spoke about your father's passing, and, it leads right into grief, because I know you were grieving, literally the loss of your dad around that time when Amaya was born. But as let's talk about grief and respect or loss with the transition. Now, when I interview parents, for my book, people talk about it in my book, and so some parents experience some sense of grief or loss. Some don't. Truly, some don't. Some have that duality, as I say. They're celebrating and they're accepting while they're grieving. They might be angry, resent. There's all different things, depressed. So what about you? I know there was a part when, because you talk about the social and medical transition and different types of transition, but there was a portion around a surgery that if I recall this right, there was an unexpected feeling of, I guess, grief or loss. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's how I felt it when I was reading. You want to expand on that? If you did have any experiences with grief, and if it was around that, what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think for me, I do not believe that I experienced grief and loss in the way that many parents describe. And again, I think that has to do with what I just said about Amaya just always leading me from very early on this journey. At the same time, yes, there were times of great cognitive, emotional, mind-heart dissonance, like in my mind, I'm getting that this is where we're going. In my heart of hearts, I kind of knew this is where, but yet having to make these intense choices for someone, I found myself frozen often. So we have fight, we have flight, we have fear. I think there was fear of making decisions that, how did I know that this was the right thing? How could I make such dramatic, permanent permissions to have my child go through these changes? And I think that happened often in our journey. It was not that I didn't see, it was that I was perhaps afraid that each time I would take a step, it would be affirming, yep, we're really going on this journey. From the time my kid wanted boy underwear, that bothered me so much more than getting boy jeans and boy t-shirts and boy socks. The underwear was something about that. And in reflection, my husband and I talked about that. It's like, yeah, the underwear is such a personal, private thing that really only a person knows about. Right. And so these things, when I look back, I would say there are times where I almost wish I could have gotten it a little quicker a couple of times, that I feel sadness for perhaps what I didn't know, which of course we don't know what we don't know. And we do the best we can with what we've got.
Right.
And I do feel those pangs of regret or mistakes. And of course, I try not to be hard on myself, and writing about it, actually admitting it, really helps. It's like, mistakes, we make them as parents. There is no one way. And we only know by looking back if our decisions are really right. So
how did you know?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just because, thanks for your honesty here. So these tough decisions that you had to make, whether it was underwear or, I guess, helping your child be more aligned socially in those ways, gender expression, and then medically transitioning. That's what I was referring to, because I would never on an interview discuss a child's medical transition. I mean, Lil knows I always like, that's but because you write about it and you brought it up, I'm going to just go with your lead. And again, if anything's triggering for anybody listening, if this triggers you in any way, Janna, because I know that it could be exhausting, you don't need to answer. And I'm not going to ask you to go very deep. You can go as deep as you want. Is that when you had to make some decisions about, I know that if I have this correct, I read a lot of stuff, right? So, but I think I have this right. You puberty blockers were not an option at the time when your child, I don't know, well, you didn't know about it. I don't know. And I'm not even advocating for them or not for them. I'm just bringing up the fact you discussed it. And then the decisions of hormones or perhaps surgery, whatever you want to say or not say, that's your right. You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah. So yeah, Amaya gives permission, and that is an important part of his story because he was not the pioneer kid that was under 18 to be having gender affirming surgery, which is his insistence and deep dysphoria was around his developing chest. When he went through puberty, he was young. He was by 10, he was already developing. And his chest was what really caused his outer dysphoria. So puberty was a very difficult time. And I talk about him, the name of the chapter is Bound. Bound, he was bound. He wanted to bind his chest as soon as he was able to explore on actually YouTube, thank you. He was finding just older than him, the 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds that were getting gender affirming surgeries and starting to share their stories. This was early on. This was 12 years ago. And it was, almost half his life ago when he first started having this longing to deal with his chest, and it bound up his brain, his energy. He was not the same child. And he took me on the journey. He wrote an email. I don't know how to live like this. And that's how I sensed the urgency. And my child never cried, even as a baby. He really didn't cry unless something was going on. Here he was crying, and it was like, oh my gosh, something is really going on. And it was when he just became so insistent that he couldn't take it anymore and he wanted a binder and all of this, I realized that we had to get more help, and that came in the form of really amazing gender affirming therapists who taught me so much, and also finding gender spectrum. And you mentioned the puberty blockers. Most of the families were kids with much younger children who were being given an option of looking at puberty blockers. They were truly among the pioneers. UCSF had just opened their clinic here. It was really early on in trans affirming care for youth. And I had a lot of feeling of like, whoa, we missed that boat. Missed that. And Amaya was not yet talking about it before his breast grew in, that he needed to do something. So I was supported in going with him and not putting any thought agenda of like, oh, we better get on this and do puberty blockers. Again, everyone's choice is different. It's different now too. We have more options. It's challenging choices. As we get back to that, I realized by talking to another mom who was among the pioneers, their family did the lawsuit in California to get under 18-year-olds gender affirming surgery covered in California by insurance companies. So thank you to that family. And she happened to be a family friend of a dear friend. She connected us. Very few parents were around to talk to at that time. So thank you for inviting me to do this. And she said, do you want to be part of your child's life and private medical choices? Do you want to help your child if your child is going to make these choices? What if when they're 18, what if he's 18 and he wants to do it? Will he then invite you in? Again, no judgment. Many kids do this when they're 18. So the parents aren't always invited in. And she said to me, you have an opportunity to explore. You can launch your child as his authentic self in college. You have that chance now. It was early high school time. And she gave me a lot to think about. Had your book been around, that would have been helpful, because these are the exact questions we need to ask ourselves, and you help us guide us give us that opportunity. And
thanks. I just want to, you talked about the therapist, because you talk about that in here, and having the other resources. I know, we could go for 12,000 hours, and we'll maybe do part 2 with you, because you're so dynamic to me, and so honest, about these hard decisions. Is that how therapists, medical health professionals, and that when a parent is lost, that's who they look to, and that it's really important that you go to a person who really has experience and knows the research and knows the background and can show you all aspects and all sides, and then you can make the best educated decision. We're educators, right? You and I, and we everything is based, goes back to your mother-in-law, the academic and the science, and then to really know what would be best based on other people's experiences. We're counting on, all of us are counting on medical professionals and research and data. And I know that you had gone through a few experiences with different therapists until you found the right one. And I can say that is a common theme when I do my research for my books, that people say that they're not looking for somebody who's going to agree with them, but they're looking for somebody who's going to hear them when they speak and then help them along the way. And I feel that you had that aha moment. And then when it felt, it felt right, just like when you were saying other things, just felt right. Like when you say Emily knew that Maya was her brother and it felt right. When you find the right therapist, it feels right. And if and until that moment, it might not. And so, right, you talk about that in the book, how critical that was, or the right organizations.
absolutely. There are many people who might be empathetic and compassionate and helpful and actually want to help. But for parents that have trans youth, we need someone who is educated beyond our own education. And we need that person to be able to invite these conversations for the child, to scaffold, to not put upon, but to give them a chance and a construct in which to explore. And that was clear when I met one person who was well recommended by someone who was respected. But again, this was 10 or 11 years ago. There were many less people in this area. And at the same time, the people that were really interested and passionate. And so when I met the first person, she was interested, passionate, but didn't feel like this was going to be the right fit for my kid. I needed someone who I felt the kid was going to really be into hanging out with. And then I met Kristen Brew, who is quoted in the book, and she quickly referred to my child as rock star. Well, I want to say same about her. And also Cami Duvall, who I facilitate workshops with. She is one of my teachers in life, and she is a therapist who these two people ran a group that my child also attended. So I think it is important to find someone who both can educate the parent. Now, she didn't really see me as a therapy client. She saw me as the parent of the child who was in therapy. So of course she held certain things in confidence, but she was able to talk to me and help me understand what trans youth might experience and what my child might be having a lived experience. And we worked so well together. And I think that is so key. And I also know how it feels when doctors are not ready. Now in the area where I live, there's a lot of doctors that are ready. They're more ready. There are clinics here. There are wonderful people and support, but in many areas of the country and the world, this is not the case. And so I think they are at least where we were 10, 11, 12 years ago around here, where it's difficult to find someone who even knows what you're talking about and isn't afraid, because they don't know. And certain professions don't want to admit when they don't know something.
Right.
right? And
No, I
so,
just also want to interject that, you bring up the other communities or areas that don't have what
yes,
you have where you are. And a lot of people, this is right now very, very scary in the US.
yeah,
And so, it's heartbreaking for parents and children who are gender expansive, in transition, trying to understand themselves, and the medical professionals that may be trained but are scared to do things for their own career and their
uh-huh.
livelihood. And
Mm.
I just want to ask you about, like, as an educator, I'd be remiss not to ask you, in school, I mean, I have the whole book about, reflect, the reflective work for teachers and support staff, because this is, I feel that you and I can bring something in the classroom. We use, like you said, when we become educated, we can use what we're using to educate others, right? And that's what my steps are now, and as is yours too. And in the classroom, we try to be as much support for our parents when they come to us about things, because I had many parents who might have been you, right? And would come to me and ask me things, and I would just say, I will never tell a parent what to do. That's never my place, but I can offer them resources and I can refer them to a therapist. I mean, in the books, I always say, this whole chapter about finding therapists, and to find people that know what they're doing, because as an educator, I can only give resources and stuff, but to honor those children in our classroom that are gender nonconforming, gender diverse, however, and especially in early childhood and all the way through. And so for you as an educator, do you feel that you look through it through a different lens now? I mean, I think you were always welcoming, but this has to have influenced yourself as an educator. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, it absolutely does. And it's interesting because as I wrote in the book, when I was a young preschool teacher and I had children in my class that were gender diverse or expansive or creative, gender creative, I just would say, well, we're going to love and support them. A parent might come to me and say, oh, I'm scared. Why? I think that means my child's gay.
Right.
I said, well,
That's what I say
well,
all the time
yeah,
too.
yeah, because this is the only construct we had. Now we understand that by age 4, children have a very clear sense of their gender. This is according to the Academy of Pediatrics. And it, so trans children know who they are too, but they don't have reflection. So now in the classroom, I want to bring I bring a lot of diversity in my languaging. Also acknowledging that there are trans and non-binary parents, and there are many more of these now, LGBTQ parents. And we must be inclusive in our languaging, or I feel this is best practice. We be inclusive in our languaging. It's an evolution. That which I knew then is not true now. Then I said, well, so your child might be gay. How will we know? We might not know till they're in puberty. What are you going to do? You're going to love your child. You're going to be there for them. And then whatever happens, they will know you were there for them. And that's what I say when a parent asks, is this a fad? Is this a phase? My kid must be going through a phase. Possible. As you say, I'm not going to tell you. I don't know. But the offering that we can make as educators, as people that have also educated and learned from people who are trans and non-binary, is we will know. And the best thing we can do is be there and be there along the steps and do what we can to support those steps. And we will know as we see. You look in your child's eyes and you know.
And I think as an educator, it's more that we don't want to do any, as a parent, I guess, don't want to do any harm. So we don't want to ridicule a child or insult them or make them feel, if people if somebody who has not enough education, that's how I feel, they may say something inappropriately that can harm a child, not even meaning to. And that the more people know and understand to just let a person be, a child be, teach them, and let them be wearing what they need to wear in class to feel whole.
Yes.
Call them the name and refer to them the pronoun as they need while they're figuring out who they are. And, right, let us be a passenger in their car. They're driving.
I wonder if we could have a little story time, because it fits so perfectly in what you're
I would
saying.
love it, because we're almost getting to the end. So that would be great. So thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is so amazing. And just it helps to tell our stories. Yeah. And this is why I so encourage people, even if they don't perceive themselves as writer, it helps to tell our stories, because we learn so much through that. So here's a part from my book. It's a brief chapter. It's called I Wish to Be a Grandpa. Amaya had a vivid imaginary play life when he was very young. When he was in his imaginary world, he would interact with all sorts of characters. He preferred to play alone in his imaginary world, but we could often hear him. And what we heard was often fascinating. His best friend in that world was a boy named Rocco, and Amaya would talk out loud to him and to his other friends when he thought nobody was listening. He also liked to dress up when he played in this world, but unlike his older sister, who always chose the frilly dresses or tutus, when Amaya played dress up, he donned superhero gear or a jacket and tie, which was really his favorite, a jacket and tie. One particular time when he was about 3, I watched unnoticed as Amaya played with Rocco in our living room. He had a bunch of toys around. He had the baby dolls, the G.I. Joes, the selection of trucks, stuffed animals. And in the midst of it all, I heard him. He was singing to himself, I wish to be a grandpa, grandpa. I wish to be a grandpa. I thought to myself, did I hear that right? I listened. He continued, I wish to be a grandpa. I didn't understand. He was 3. Didn't he know by now that girls grew up to be grandmas? I said, well, maybe not. So I decided to talk to him about it. Educator, teachable moment. I decided to talk to him about it, and I interrupted his play. And I said, did you know that girls grow up to be grandmas and boys grow up to be grandpa? And he said, I'm a boy. Side note, I was policing his gender right there, wasn't I? That's a new reflection I'm coming upon. I learn every time I read. So I just smiled at him, and in my best, most progressive, best practice way, I said, well, boys have a penis, girls have a vagina. We talked a bit more. We acknowledged what parts that were had, and we included together that he was a girl. So this was, like you said, undereducated, or I called it my own ignorance. I discounted this incident was perhaps my child's very first outward affirmation of his inner knowing. Now we know his gender is male, and was then too. But back then I did tell him it was perfectly fine to be a girl that dresses up like a boy. I did not tell him it was possible that he was a boy in a girl body. I hadn't yet arrived at the words or had the insight. So I feel that was a pivotal moment for my child. I discounted his early and perhaps first affirmation, and he perhaps internalized what I said and wasn't able to talk about it till he had his own inner dissonance, turmoil, and through wonderful counseling. And, I go on and I say, if I'm to support parents, which is what I do now. So I was prescient in the book, knowing that this was going to be life work. And I would say perhaps we could simply mirror back to the child what they're saying to us. It's a wonderful technique. I wish to be a grandpa. Oh, you wish to be a grandpa. And yeah, I could have all my machinations in my mind, but to come to being the mirror for a child, this is best practice, not telling them who they can and can't be in life. I just didn't really understand that really the breadth of what it means to be trans and what it means to be someone who identifies in a way that is not their gender assigned at birth. And I think he was telling me exactly who he was at that time. And so now we say, can we listen? Can we be that mirror and follow the light? As one of my friends and another parent of a trans person says, I was in a dark cave, she says, and I just would look for the lights and I'd follow the lights. So I think, yes, providing the possibilities and then going along with, and this is how a person comes to their authenticity, whoever they are.
Beautiful, just beautiful. And mirroring is a very big deal. S.J. Langer writes about it a lot in his book. And I know that, we make mistakes, we all do, but we do the next right thing. And you are, to me, a beautiful example of a person who really does all they can to have their children be whole. And all your children, you write about all your children, how you help them to be whole, and just happen to be part of Amaya's journey. And I feel so honored to have you as a guest on the show. I have so many other questions to ask you, really. I could ask you off screen, but I only got to maybe 2 of the sheets, but, my two things I had so many, but that doesn't matter, because you said what you needed to say and we heard what we needed to hear today from you. So I don't even need to ask you your advice, because I think the mirroring is the best message you can give, and to love your child, and so they can remain here with you on earth as long as they possibly can. And I thank you for your time. Again, you're going to show the links that for everything, any of the things that Janna felt was important to her while her child was transitioning. And any work that Janna does to let you know, you put that up. I know you'll do the other things with me, which, like you always do. But the importance here is that we met in a beautiful way. And I hope that everybody comes away with seeing, I describe you as a powerful, reflective human being. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to sit here with you today. And Lil, I know you've been quiet, but you've been nodding and listening. And I think that there's a beauty in that too. Some people, sometimes we have to nod and listen and absorb, because it's a lot. And it's a lot for parents to grasp. And small, gentle steps. I think the last question I will ask is any recommendation on how to take care of yourself? You mentioned yoga. For a parent to take care of themselves, like to have dates with their spouses if they have a spouse, or to have dates with their other children so that the children feel heard. Is there something you'd like to add? And with yourself and with your child, as your relationship may evolve, because your relationship may evolve. We never got a chance to talk about how that happened, but it's in the book somewhat too.
It is. He is one of my just closest people in my life. So I'm super grateful for that. And he's someone I can depend on as he's getting older. But for parents, yes, especially, we just had a parent group last night and it was so tender. It was actually a little smaller than my usual groups, which are more like 15, 20. This was more 10. And there were some dads and just the feeling people were describing of knowing a group of other parents that are experiencing a similar journey of having a gender expansive, questioning, transitioning child, all these, to know that a circle of support is there, even if you don't go all the time and you're not such a group person or you're not such a Zoom person, find someone else to talk to that doesn't have to be explained. Your authentic experience is important as well. And so finding a group that can nod and mirror and reflect and not make you have to be the one teaching them, which often happens in our friends and family network. Find a circle of support. It is so key. Even if it's just a one-time And I know, DM, you do work with parents. I do work with parents. And also taking care of yourself, finding things you love, and knowing your child is still your child. That person is that person. Remember the things that your child loves. They might change, but we all find new things and we let go of things, who they are in their character, and honor that. And remember, going for drives and getting food. I hate to say it, but food can be a fun motivator to get the kid out of the house. Let's go for their favorite treat or their favorite activity. Just find ways to stay connected during this challenging time. And, all teens are a pain in the butt. So remember that too, right? It's not just about being trans. So don't also attribute everything to a gender journey. It's not about that. And there are sometimes things that are coexisting at the same time that need to be addressed. So make sure we don't only put things on being trans, and being trans is it's just one part.
Okay, excellent. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we don't want to say that everything is caused by that. I'm glad you brought that up. But also leave space for those children that do not align with the binary.
Yes.
Give them that space to explore who they are, and don't put pressure on them. They're already so pressured. We didn't get into any of the stories about your child's exploration themselves through the internet and things, but children will find a way to get their needs met, with or without a parent. So let's hope that a parent or some person in their life that matters, that child can find that adult to help them appear an adult.
Right, because it just takes one adult to make that difference. So let's be our child's supporters and be that person for them.
So thank you for your time. I think we'll have you back. We'll figure that all out. Lil, I know it's late. I don't know if we had any questions or comments. If you wanted to add that in, if you need to end, I get it too.
We can go as long as either of you want.
Okay.
So we don't have any specific questions to be addressed here. I'd just like to make a tiny contribution, saying that as a parent, I feel so privileged to be privy to these conversations that are happening here in the Series D. I've learned so much about how to be more open with my own children, in the framework, as you were mentioning earlier. There are places in the world where education still hasn't caught up. It's starting here in Spain. I just found out yesterday that they're insisting on gender neutral language in the schools, which is fantastic, because it's fantastic because recently I was going over homework with my younger child in natural sciences and its anatomy, and talking about gender and totally missing the boat. And so I'm having a conversation and I'm just imagining what my children are talking about in the classroom later.
I think that's great, Lil. I think that it's important for parents whose children are not questioning their gender to also really understand, because sometimes they really don't know much, because why would they, right? Why would they? Sometimes they need to know basis at first with things. There's so many things to address in a day, and to help be an ally for somebody like Janna, who could feel so isolated. And I think it's beautiful that you're a part of this conversation, Lil, and that you can add that aspect to this. This is why, I'm thrilled about what you're saying with Spain. I'm training school districts now, going in, working with the staff. The teachers, the administrators, honestly, they're wonderful. The schools wonderful, doing cohorts online with school districts. They just don't know. They care. They just don't know. And the more we talk about this, I always say, I'm not here to convert you. I'm just here to educate you, and then you make the decision. And that's about everything in life. We're just here to give you information, then base the rest on your own personal philosophy, your belief. But let's keep a kid alive. Let's keep the kid
Exactly.
alive.
So I've shared the links both to Janna's books and the three nonprofits that she mentioned earlier in the live: Gender Spectrum, standwithtrans.org, as well as Trans Heartline. I've shared those. Also shared a link to DM Maynard's webpage, so that if you want to find out more about her books, and she usually doesn't have them on hand, so here they are.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks.
Nice.
I do want to mention a book because I made reference to it. It's S.J. Langer, because you talk about mirroring and they talk about this, and it's called Theorizing Transgender Identity for Clinical Practice, a New Model for Understanding Gender. It was one of the 5 finalists for the Lambda Literary Awards in nonfiction in 2020, and it talks a lot about theory, and it's great for clinicians, but I really feel that a person that wants to understand more about what you were talking about would really love this book and find it helpful. So I don't usually talk about this book, but I would be remiss not to on this one.
It's pertinent, and I just like to say that the Facialteam psychologist has this book on hand. That's where actually I met you, DM,
right,
at the Philly Trans Wellness Conference, and I purchased that book for our team.
Right. So on that note, I thank you both again, and we'll see you in November. We'll keep posted which the date where we have 2 people that want to come on, so we're waiting to figure out how we can make that work. And Janna, I hope to meet you in person with your family, and to continue this conversation and maybe collaborate with you in the future. I really hope we can make that work. Lil,
So
thanks for everything.
grateful.
I'd just like to add one last thing for any
I
parents.
just want to say, get her book. Get her book.
Yes.
He's always been my son. A mother worry about raising a transgender son. Oh, and the cat. There. Oh, it's just a beautiful picture. Yes, that's the back cover. But also, you talked about wearing the tie and all that. The cap too. The hat. There's a whole thing about the hat, right? I'm not giving that any more. Read it to find out what all that's about. All right. So see you soon.
Just want to say one thing before we go. Last week, because it's pertinent also to what we're talking about for parents, last week on Wednesday, it was International Pronouns Day. So
Yes.
just, if parents want to find more about that, there are more pronouns than just she and he.
Well,
and
we did a series, we did a thing with Julie
Lipson,
right, and did all things practice your pronouns, and their work is fabulous for pronouns. And I thought of them because they just did another video, which is great. Oh,
yeah, they did a song with us here on the show.
Another song that they just changed the words to, the pronouns to, which is great. So you can check out Practice Your Pronouns with you'll find that there too.
Yeah, and on the Facialteam YouTube channel, we have a playlist that's all of these live streams. So there are a lot of different episodes for parents. We've had other parents on here before, and partners. So, and Julie, the non-binary therapist that helped us learn more about pronouns. And also last Thursday, going with what you were both talking about in letting the child take the lead. Last Thursday was Spirit Day, which is sort of a holiday, that's led by the youth. And it's about anti-bullying, but it's really come along in the trans community to sort of, it's the youth movement. So I'd recommend any parents to look into that and see what young people are doing today in terms of LGBTI bullying.
Okay, I just said, sorry, then and Hope in a Box is doing now their next books, and they for rural communities, they send boxes there to help. And I just heard they're going to be putting 89 more of my education book in their boxes. In 89, I'm so excited.
Again.
They just told me, yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
So, but they really help with the rural communities. That's what in the schools and the libraries, and some boxes of books that are related to LGBTQ plus books that identify characters for
Right.
them all around.
They should
So-
do that for the parent-teacher associations and get Janna's book in there.
Yes,
I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
See.
I'm already working on it. I'm already working on it.
Here.
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay. So it's thank you for everything. I think we can
Thank you.
say our love.
Thank you so much, Janna. And I would just like to say thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you, DM Maynard, for this wonderful series. Stay tuned next month. We'll be back with more lives here. And let's give a hand, please, everybody, to our guests. And don't forget to follow, share, and like our videos. And remember, everybody, you are not alone, and your health and happiness matter. Until next time.
Thank you.